Welcome to episode 15 of A New Way to Love, Live, and Lead. I'm your host, Cheryne Blom, a master coach, author, and the founder of the Self-Mastery Hub, your center for self-inquiry, healing, and growth. This podcast is here to remind you that midlife is an awakening, a time to come home to yourself and unleash the best version of you. Season 2 is all about the art of self-connection, how to return to yourself, rebuild trust, and live in deep alignment with who you are. And today's episode is one that sits at the heart of all personal transformation. We're talking about self-trust. And over the last couple episodes, we've been talking about the layers or types of expression when we talk about self-connection, because that sounds really easy intellectually. We kind of go, oh yes, I do want to be self-connected. But then when we break it down, we kind of ask ourselves, what does that mean? And as I've mentioned, so many clients, when I say, you're not broken, you are disconnected from yourself, so many of them come back and say, I don't understand what you actually mean. And so this season, I'm breaking all of that down. I'm into really clear steps, into a roadmap for you to understand what are the steps, what is the pathway to coming back to yourself. So the last couple episodes, we've spoken about self-awareness, how self-awareness is the first step to coming back to yourself and recognizing when you are self-abandoning and bringing that focus back to yourself. Last episode, I spoke about self-respect and how honoring yourself and honoring your truth, again, is the journey back to self. And now we're going deeper into the core as we unpack self-trust. Have you ever said to yourself, I know what I should do, but I just don't do it? Or maybe you've broken so many promises to yourself, starting the new routine, setting the boundary, leaving the job, that now when you do set an intention, there's a quiet voice inside that says, yeah, right, we've heard that before. That voice is the sound of broken trust. And here's the truth. Before we can build confidence, before we can live authentically, before we can lead with power and our presence, we have to rebuild trust with ourselves. Trust is the foundation of mental wellness. It's like the tree trunk of our well-being. Because when you don't trust yourself, every decision feels uncertain. You second guess your intuition, you question your worth, and you start seeking validation outside of you instead of safety within you. But when you start to trust yourself, when you believe in your own word, your own wisdom, your own worth, you become unshakable. Like one of those trees that have been standing for 300 years with such a strong trunk and deep roots into the ground. So today we're going to explore how to rebuild that trust and how to finally believe in yourself again. And for me personally, trust has been a huge journey. And, on a kind of really basic level, my stress pattern is overthinking. And if you haven't done your stress test yet, if you haven't done your hidden fear persona quiz and understand what your stress pattern is, check out the link in the show notes below, because it's quite powerful when you recognize that your anxiety or your stress pattern is you going into fear. And the more you can recognize it, the faster you can come back to yourself. Again, remember that first step is self-awareness. So go and do that quiz if you haven't done it. And like I was saying, mine is overthinking. When my nervous system is triggered and anxiety is unleashed, I go into overthinking. I can kill the greatest idea with a flurry of thoughts. And 2 levels of awareness have been such a game changer for me. So first of all, knowing my overthinking is coming from anxiety. And remember that anxiety is a separation from self. I mentioned that in the last couple episodes. And it's really powerful to recognize that I'm either in self-connection or I'm in anxiety, and that my anxiety is trying to control the uncertainty or ease my worry, or it helps me break out of that incessant mind chatter. When I realize that mind chatter and my ruminating or anticipating or overthinking is anxiety, I quickly can nip it in the bud. And instead of staying stuck in my perfectionism or being too risk adverse, I can grab the key points that I need to consider. And instead of getting stuck in analysis paralysis, I can push myself to take courageous action. Whether that be releasing another blog post or doing a reel or a podcast episode or having a critical conversation that I need to have. It forces me to step back into connecting to my inner confidence and connecting to my inner power, connecting to my authentic self. And the second layer of awareness was understanding that my fear was actually a lack of trust. In fact, fear can be simplified into understanding it as a lack of trust. We can either be in trust or we can be in fear. Because when we are in trust, our nervous system says we are safe. And when we are in fear, our nervous system is feeling threatened and is putting us into our survival mode. And I kind of like to look at it this way, that imagine you have a coin and you're looking at 2 sides of a coin, like heads and tails. And we can flip a coin. And if it lands on one side, we can see the world through a lens of fear. And if you flip it, you can see the world through your lens of trust. And so it's really powerful to recognize that when we're able to just stop and flip the coin and come back to our lens of trust, it allows us to have a completely different perspective. Trust moves us forward. It gives us an inner strength. Like I said, it's the tree trunk of mental well-being, and it grounds us into the present moment where we can be deeply rooted in our truth. And self-connection and self-trust go hand in hand, because when we are disconnected, we go into our fear patterns, like I was talking about my overthinking or worrying or catastrophizing. Remember, I spoke about the 5 faces of anxiety in previous episodes. But when self-connected, we tune in, we feel the sensations in our body, and we get a clear yes or no. And my biggest mistakes or life detours have come when I've made decisions without checking in with my inner compass, or when I've heard my inner compass and I've ignored it. And I want to get a little bit real and raw for a moment, because when I was reflecting on this episode and why I stopped trusting myself, I realized that it was a result of me going through an incredibly stressful time. It wasn't necessarily one thing, but it was a lot of things. And there was a particular time in my life which really, really challenged me. And when I look back at this really difficult time that caused me so much emotional stress and burnout, it was the time when my daughter was going through severe mental health challenges, and we were in and out of hospitals and in and out of therapy sessions, and it was such a stressful time. And as a parent, I felt as if I was living my greatest fear. You know, as the saying goes, you are only as happy as your sickest child, right? And at the same time, I found myself questioning questioning my parenting, questioning every decision I'd make, questioning how did this happen on my watch? And without knowing it, all this questioning and trauma was me losing trust in myself. And it began to have a ripple effect on all areas of my life. The smallest decisions felt huge and exhausting. However, when I caught myself in the loop and reminded myself that I've always done the best with the resources that I've had at the time, and that the situation was actually not about me, and when I let go of all that trying to control and helplessness, it helped me return back to me and to realize that I can only control what I can control. And I decided that the best thing that I can do for her and myself was to love us both unconditionally, to be gentle, to be compassionate, and to care for myself through our life wobble. And bringing the focus back to myself and my self-care allowed me to attend to my nervous system. And instead of getting stuck in othering and the self-abandonment loop, as I discussed in episode 13, I was able to connect back to me. So again, it came down to my daily devotions to the habits of connection. And I'll come back to that later on in this episode. But most importantly, I realized that by breaking these small promises to myself, it chipped away at my self-respect quietly, almost invisibly. And that was impacting my trust. And that trust isn't built in the big moments. It's built in the small ones. It's built every time you follow through on something that matters to you. When I finally started keeping small promises, returning to my daily walks in nature, my journaling, my speaking up for myself instead of staying silent, all those small things that represent respecting and honoring me, that's when something shifted. And I realized that self-trust is the foundation of freedom. Self-trust means believing that you can rely on yourself emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. It's the inner knowing that says, I can handle this. I've got this. I'm okay. I'm safe. Even if it's uncomfortable. Even if I don't know how it's all going to unfold. When you trust yourself, you stop abandoning yourself to please others. You stop outsourcing decisions. You stop negotiating your truth. Because self-trust isn't about being perfect. It's about being present. It's knowing that even if you fall, you'll catch yourself. So why do we lose trust in ourselves? Firstly, let's look at self-betrayal. When we say yes when we mean no, or stay quiet when we want to speak up, or tolerating what we know isn't right, or if we're judging ourselves, it causes us to question ourselves. Perfectionism is another biggie. When we expect ourselves to never fail, we stop trying altogether. When we're seeking external validation, when our worth depends on others' approvals, you stop listening to your inner truth. And also when we have unhealed shame. That voice that says you always mess up keeps you stuck in fear instead of faith. Shame is such a toxic emotion that keeps us stuck to instantly disconnecting from our calm center. And we go into our stress response to kind of numb or distract ourselves from that shame. And so here is the trust equation, a simple formula I teach my clients to rebuild trust. Trust equals truth plus repetition plus self-compassion. Let's break that all down. So first, truth. To be radically honest with yourself. Stop pretending you're okay when you're not. Acknowledge your feelings. Name what you want. Honesty is the first act of self-respect. Ask yourself, where am I pretending? And what is my truth here? Repetition. Small, consistent acts build integrity. Every time you do what you say you do, you strengthen your internal bond. Start small. Drink the water. Walk every day. Make the phone call. Have the conversation. Consistency over intensity. And remember, consistency builds trust. So when we honor ourselves, when we say yes, when we have that integrity, it's going to build that foundation of trust. And self-compassion is another biggie here because we have to forgive and not punish the process. You're going to fall off track. You're human. The key is to repair, not reject yourself. Instead of saying, I failed, say, I'm learning to show up again. What's the feedback? What have I learned? That's the real trust loop. Truth, repetition, compassion. The more you practice it, the stronger your self-belief becomes. And here's the truth. Confidence doesn't come from being perfect. It comes from proving to yourself over and over again that you can be trusted. And my self-reflection question for you today is to take a moment and ask yourself, where have I broken trust with myself? And what small promise can I start keeping today? It could be as simple as getting to bed on time or saying no when you actually mean no, honoring your yeses and nos, or keeping one commitment to your well-being, not because you should, but because you matter, putting yourself first. And I'd love to share a self-connection practice this week. Find yourself a quiet space and place your hands on your heart and take 3 slow, deep breaths. Slow inhale, slow exhale. Really connect with your breath and bring yourself into the present moment, feeling the sensations in your body here and now. And when you're present, repeat this to yourself. I trust myself to honor my needs. I trust myself to tell the truth. I trust myself to begin again. Say those words. Let them settle into your heart, into your consciousness, into your actions, into your words, into your reality. And what I'd love you to remember from this episode is that self-trust is built through consistency, not intensity. Every promise you keep to yourself strengthens your confidence. Trusting yourself doesn't mean never failing. It means never abandoning yourself again. And check out the show notes below because you will find the intentional living worksheet. And that is your first step to guide yourself into living in alignment with what really matters to you and setting those intentions. I've got a really exciting course on setting your values starting super soon, and I'll be sharing that in upcoming episodes. For right now, check out that intentional living worksheet. And if today's message inspired you, please share it with a friend. And I'd love it if you can rate and review this podcast because it will help us spread the message of midlife awakening to many more people and help bring in a new way to love, live, and lead. Thank you for joining me on a new way to love, live, and lead. And remember, you're not too late. You're right on time. And your most trusting, powerful, stable chapter begins right now.